Welcome to Empire Building, the podcast where we talk about building a big business and an even bigger life. I'm your co-host, Tiffany Fikes.
And I'm Sarah Reynolds. Today, we are going to be talking about building wealth, what numbers matter. And before we get into that, we just have to share with you guys, Tiffany and I were doing some research about what things people are Googling when it had to do with building wealth. And there's some funny subjects that apparently a lot of Americans are Googling. What did we find, Tiffany?
Yeah, the weirdest one, the third one, was how to get rich in 2 seconds, which I'm like, that's very specific. I don't know why. There must be a TikTok video going around or something, because I don't even know what that would be.
One word that you can read in 2 seconds. Yeah.
Yeah. That was insane. I mean, there's the normal how to get rich fast and, those typical things. But the how to get rich in 2 seconds was making me crack up.
Yes.
So.
It was a really good, what's it called? I'm struggling with a cold today, so I'm not as good as I normally am. But what's the... people are constantly Googling these things, meaning that they want to know how to get rich quick, fast, which actually goes against a little bit about our philosophy here at Empire Building. And so it's a good title. These are good titles that I think would bait, right? Clickbait. These are good. Yes. These are good clickbait topics, but we want to be authentic that we do not actually believe you can get rich in 2 seconds.
I would love, if any of our listeners know how to get rich in 2 seconds, I would love to know what the answer to that is.
Yeah, please message us. Today we're going to talk about tactical ways in terms of how to build wealth. And it actually starts with what numbers to track, what numbers actually matter. And it makes me think of one of our co-founders, so one of our partners at a business that Tiffany and I own together, which is called Her Best Life, Carissa Acker, is quoted many times with this quote. And she says, your path is in the math. Your path is in the math. So what does that quote, when you hear that quote, Tiffany, what does that quote sort of mean to you? And I would ask all of our listeners, when you hear your path is in the math, what does that quote mean to you, all of our listeners?
I bet people are like running for the hills. Like that quote sounds like the worst to a lot of people. Now I love me some math. So for me, when I hear the path is in the math, it's like you've got to just figure out the equation. But what I love about math is 99% of the time, A plus B equals C. And so once you understand the math, the path is clear. And so if you're not afraid of it, if you don't run away from the math, then your clarity increases as you understand more about the path.
Yeah, I came in to tell my daughter Olivia hi the other night, and she was working on her math homework. And she looked up at me with her beautiful brown eyes, and she was like, I love math, Mommy. I'm good at math. And she's struggling with it and does not love math. But I loved her affirmation with that. Because I think it reminded me, because I love math just like Tiffany does, and truly love it. And it reminded me, in my own daughter, there are so many that don't, that is scary, right? For me, it actually gives me peace. That quote gives me peace, because if I can figure out the math, then that means that the path forward is completely clear. I know exactly what to do if I can figure out the math. And so the point of the quote is to give peace, not to give stress. And I know that it doesn't come natural for many of our listeners. And so we don't want to just run past that.
Well, and for those of you who aren't familiar with Carissa Acker, I think she's more like Olivia than she's like Sarah and Tiffany. This was her affirmation to herself. I will figure out the math because that will make everything else easier and peaceful, to your point. So I want to make sure you have that background on who Carissa is as well. She's not running forward towards the math. She just understood that if I can understand this, everything else is easier.
So true. Such a good point. So today we're going to talk about how to build wealth by following the path that's in the math, right? And it actually starts with building a habit. So developing really, I believe, the most important habit when it comes to wealth building. And that is building the habit of tracking your numbers. So to know the path, you have to first know the math, which starts with tracking your numbers. So today we're going to talk about what are the most important numbers to track or to watch, and sort of the why behind each of these numbers in terms of building wealth. And this is mainly focused on personal wealth building. And we later on we're gonna most likely do a topic on what to track for your business. But today it's like, if you want to build wealth, okay, what habit do you need to implement in terms of tracking, and what numbers do you need to be tracking each and every month, and how often? And so get your pen and paper out if you're in a safe place. Okay. If you're not in the safe place, go to the show notes where we'll put some of these hot things to track. But what are the things that we need to track personally to build our wealth?
So the first thing that I would say that you need to get used to tracking is your spending. So there's two things. You can budget and you can track your spending. So the budget is telling your money ahead of time what you're going to do, like making decisions with your money ahead of time. And the second is more like a looking back, what did I do with my money? And they go hand in hand, but you may be starting from no tracking at all. And so you may need to first start with, where did my money go? So that then you can set up a budget in the future so that you're making decisions about what happens to your money. And I know a lot of people, if they didn't run away when I said math, when I say budget, they're gone for sure.
Me, I'm one of these people. We have a finance controller now at Empower Home, and their job is to basically budget and put controls around all spending. And I'm like, oh man, they're like, I love them. And it's a very hard topic for me when it comes to budgeting. I think I love looking at it more first with, okay, where am I actually spending? Like, where is my money going? Because I think the truth is that if you look, my grandparents are such a example of this in my life. So neither of them graduated high school. They grew up in a small country sort of area in Southern Virginia, and they were blue collar workers. So they didn't have a high school diploma. They didn't even have obviously a college degree, and they made an hourly wage their entire life. So never once were they put on salary. They did not make tons of money. I don't think they ever made six figures in 1 year. But yet they kept their spending in line to where my Meemaw passed away as a net worth millionaire, and my granddaddy is still living right now and is a millionaire. And it all shows that it's actually not about what we make. It's about what we keep and what we spend or what we don't spend. And so the first thing that you want to look at is, okay, what am I spending money on? And it's shocking when you do that. I mean, George and I did this, 3 to 4 times last year, where we sat down and we just pulled out our credit card statements and pulled out our bank statements and just looked, okay, what are we spending money on? And the biggest category for our family that was shocking was how much we eat out.
Yeah.
And how much we could save if we figured out cooking more, or like being more frugal with leftovers even.
Yeah.
Taking leftovers from dinner for the lunch the next day versus paying for lunch. But there's different things. Now, I wouldn't have even known to think like that had I have not tracked what we were spending.
Yeah.
And so tracking what you spend is critical to building wealth, to make sure that you're spending money on the things that really matter.
And you may decide the restaurants matter. Like, I enjoy going out to restaurants every night or whatever. But until you know what that dollar amount is, you actually can't decide if that's where you want your money to go. So start with tracking, what am I spending? Then you layer on the intention of a budget, which a
yes.
lot of people hear budget and think restriction. But a budget is actually, like, my personality is kind of, I grew up heavily budgeted. I had a budget before. I never didn't know where my money was going because of just how I was raised. And for me, a budget actually gave me permission to spend because I was always looking at how little can I spend, how can I be more frugal in all of these categories? And then once I realized, I have $700 or $1,000 a month to spend on restaurants and eating out, then I enjoyed eating out more because I wasn't beating myself up like, I could be eating at home for more economical. I knew I had the money in my budget. So the budget can give you permission if you look at it that way.
It's also like the reverse of that. So Tiffany and I couldn't be more opposite. In terms of co-hosts that are recording this, which is good. Okay. The opposite of that, right? When I hear budget, right, I think like you're trying to constrain me or sort of tell me what to do, right? And yes, I had to change the way I think of saying I'm telling my money what to do, meaning I'm not being told what to do. I'm telling my money what to do. And so it's not actually a constraint. It's actually being very specific about where you're going to spend money, giving you permission to spend money in certain areas, and then making sure that you're putting the most important things first, right? My dad has always said, I can know who someone is by looking at two things. The first is their calendar, how they spend their time, and the second is their bank account. And if you want your character to reflect in your spending, a budget is actually the perfect way to do that because you're telling the money where to go. And so don't look at it as a negative, look at it as a positive. But I loved what Tiffany said in terms of like, start tracking spending first. So don't start with the budget, just start tracking spending first. Get some awareness around how many apps you're renewing every month that you don't know right now. Get some awareness about how much you're spending on fun. Get some awareness around how much you're giving. Give some, so just get some awareness around where your money is going. And then maybe month 2, maybe month 3, start saying, okay, where do I want my money to go? Now that I know where it's going, where do I want it to go? And make sure that your budget reflects that.
Or how do I feel about it? Okay, I'm only giving away $1,000 a month. How do I feel about that? Like, I could give a whole lot more away if I was intentional about it. Or, it can be positive. It can be a spending category you don't love, a spending category you're like, I want to do more of that. I can do more of that. So, I love that, Sarah. Like, spend a couple of months just noticing and notating, like, how do you feel about that? Do you feel good about it? Okay, great. Then you don't need to touch that category. Just put that right into your budget and be intentional about it. But you may find things where you feel like you said the example you gave with the restaurants where you were just like, I want that to be different. Yeah. Great.
Yeah. So make it different. I love it.
Right.
Okay. So the first thing that you want to track is your spending, and then you're going to put it into a budget, to build wealth. The second thing that you want to track to build wealth is your net worth. Okay. And so net worth, the reason that you want to track your net worth is that your net worth actually shows you what you actually own and helps you understand where you are towards your goal. So I shared this with some of our Her Best Life Empire Circle members last week. When Wendy, our co-host, and hopefully you've listened to some other episodes, but if this is your first one, Wendy Papazian's one of our co-hosts here on the Empire Building podcast. And when she first invited me to our first ever sort of circle meeting, so it's a group of 11 powerhouse females that are all about building empires, right? And building amazing lives. I had never, ever tracked my net worth. So when she said track your net worth, I actually didn't know what it was. So let me share what net worth is. Okay, first. Okay, so if you're like me, and guys, this was only like, 5 years ago.
This wasn't like 20 years ago.
No.
This was very recently.
No. People put me up on this pedestal of like, because I do have a very large empire from a business standpoint, but I struggle with this topic when it comes to building wealth personally, because I viewed it as wealth would come if I do well with my business. And that is what happened, but I wasn't intentional okay, about my net worth. So the first thing was I had to learn what net worth was, okay? So net worth is your assets, so the things that you own minus your liabilities, okay, that equals your net worth. So for example,
and liabilities is
yes.
what you owe. So
Yes.
assets, what you own, minus liabilities, which is what you owe.
Yes,
Then
that's your net worth.
It equals net worth.
Yep. So for example, let's say you owned a house, okay? And the house was worth $1 million, okay? And you had a loan on it for $750, okay? Your net worth with just that house would be $250, okay? So it's what it's worth, so what you own, minus what you owe equals your net worth, okay? So that is your net worth. Now, why you want to track that is it will help you set goals around it. So the first thing is sort of the same as step one, right? Which was tracking your spending. You need to know what your starting point is. And there's no right or wrong starting point. I cannot stress this enough. I mean, the majority of empire builders that we have helped with this topic, many of them started with a negative net worth, meaning that they owed more than what they owned. And you don't want to get discouraged by that.
Well, and that's the number one reason why a lot of people don't track it or don't figure it out, because they're afraid of what they're going to see. And so I just want to echo Sarah with that. Like, this is information, not emotion. So like,
yes,
just do the math and figure out your starting point. There's no shame attached to it. There's nothing about who you are as a person, whether this number is minus 100 or 4 million. Like, this is just information that you need to have so that you can be intentional in the future.
Yes. And the key is if we don't know where we're starting from, then it's really hard to set goals and build wealth. And so the key here is like, figure out where you're starting from. I mean, that's the first thing I had to do was like, I was in the room feeling like I was like the best one in the room because I had one of the largest businesses. And then I quickly realized, no, Sarah, you've got a lot of growth to do in your wealth building journey. Because why we build businesses is to create I mean, everyone has different reasons, right, for why you build a business. But a big reason is to create a legacy for your family, for your future generations, or for the families of those that work for you. To do that, you have to have a starting point. And so just get your head out of the sand for a moment. If you're like many of us, including myself 5 years ago, that was so nervous about what number I was going to see, okay, let's just get a starting point and then be able to set goals around, okay, what do I want it to increase to in 12 months? And if you have your starting point, if you have a goal each year, before you know it, you're going to look up and no, you're not going to get rich in 2 seconds. Okay. But you will get a lot wealthier than you ever could imagine. And it will go by so fast. Okay. And look up and say, okay, I've really built wealth. And it started with me knowing what my net worth was and then tracking it. My recommendation in the beginning is to get in the habit of tracking it once a month. And at a minimum, once you build that habit, at a minimum, you want to be looking at your net worth at least quarterly, okay, to know, okay, are you making smart financial decisions? How are you doing towards your goal of building wealth? But it starts with knowing where your starting point is and then regularly looking at, okay, where am I at towards my goal for building wealth?
Well, and the other great thing I love about tracking your net worth is, again, it's kind of like that budget thing. If you look at it every month, you make decisions differently. So like, let's say you want to go on a vacation and you're going to have to withdraw $10,000 from your net worth to go on a vacation. You decide, yeah, it's worth it. Like for me, that's it. That's a yes every time.
Yes.
But when I think about, I want a new car, my car is boring. I don't like my car. But then when I think about having to reduce my net worth by the amount of a car, I become more content with my current car, And so sometimes it's a yes, it's worth it because I know I'm going to make a little dip, but I'm going to get paid in joy dividends. And other things for me personally, it's not worth the dip to have that because it's not bringing me enough joy.
It also, in our marriages, like what Tiffany's saying is so spot on, because in your relationships, key relationships that have to do with building wealth. So for me, that's my most key relationship is my husband, George, when it comes to wealth building. And I remember when we first sat down and calculated our net worth together, and it was right after that retreat. And then we started building goals around our net worth. And we actually had that conversation. He wanted a new car. He was driving a very old car that still was like good for our family, but it actually helped us with decision making. And we postponed it for 2 years. And the reason we postponed it was because neither of us were willing to give up our net worth goal that we had set for that year for the car. Both of us. It was very clear. But I think back, like if we would have had that conversation 10 years ago, it would have been a fight, first of all. Like it would have been a disagreement, probably. We would have ended up fighting. We would have ended up going to bed, potentially mad at each other. Who knows, right? Like, but it was not a fight. We had complete clarity around what we were trying to accomplish. We had set the goal together. We knew the starting point together, okay? And so not only does it help with your decision-making, it helps with your decision-making with your partners, with your spouses. Like it really helps prevent so many arguments. And so tracking it and setting goals around it are critical for helping the relationships that are most important to you.
I love that. Okay, so once you've got your budget down, you are tracking your spending, and you know where your net worth is, then we would say that the third thing you should track or start understanding, because it's not really something to track, it's really just some math to do to understand your goal, is your financial freedom number. So this would be the number that you have enough passive income to support the life you want to have with your passive income. So what you're going to end up with is a net worth goal. You need to have this much net worth in order to hit your financial freedom number. So yeah, it's part of your goal setting.
What I love about this, and this is so like Tiffany's right here in terms of financial freedom. And when I used to hear that, I used to be like, ugh, like who wants that? Like I love working. I love building my empire, right? And what I realized is I had such a big aha about this, because remember, this podcast is not just about building a big business, okay? We are equally passionate, if not more, about building a big life, okay? And what I love about this number in particular is when we aren't making decisions when we're not making have to decisions when it comes to our job or when it comes to our business, we're making joy decisions, like what brings us joy, what brings us happiness. That actually is what helps us build that big life. But what I've learned, guys, is it actually helps us build even bigger empires. Because when you, as the empire builder, are working within your joy, you're making decisions not because you have to do that. You're making decisions because you have freedom to make that decision. You actually are a more powerful leader, a more powerful empire builder. And so I'm getting passionate as I'm talking about it because I love this topic. I used to not like it, and I love it because it allows for all of our empire builders to make clear decisions that bring them joy once you get to a point of having passive income that funds your life.
Yeah, I love that. So how do you come up with this? Well, you start where we started, on your budget. You know, what is the amount of spending that you want to have every month? And when Joshua and I first started figuring our financial freedom number, we had more of the FI concept, which is financial independence, which is a big movement of people that once you have your food and your housing paid for, you are financially independent and you can stop. And really, they say you should stop. And so for us, we kind of had a very low threshold of we are financially free when we have our most basic needs met. However, being in this group and realizing we could live like that, that would be perfectly fine. We would be happy. And to Sarah's point of you get to make choices about how you spend your time and what you're investing in. And I don't want to give up going on trips with my family. I love working. So like I'll work just a little bit more so that I can go on trips with my family. And so we actually had to rework our financial number because it was too low when we first did it. And so now we work off of what's the lifestyle we want to have for the rest of our life. And for you, it might be that FI number, that financial independence of just the basics. Great, no judgment. Or it may be something bigger where your lifestyle, you can invite a lot of other people into your world to have a life change or different experiences because you can fund that. Like for me, when we got to that FI number, the reason we kept working was Joshua and I literally sat down and we were like, we wouldn't be able to just write checks to organizations that need our help.
Yep.
And I can't do that. Like, I don't want to give that up. I still want to be able to say yes to the things I want to say yes to. And so that adjusted our number.
Yeah. And so that needs to be actually in your calculation. So like that resonates with me so much, Tiffany, because, for me, like my personal belief is that no strength of Sarah's was given by Sarah, meaning God gave me strengths, okay? And he gifted me in business, right? I know how to make a lot of money, okay, in terms of business, okay? And the reason he did that, I believe, is to give back, to be able to give back to causes and to organizations that are actually fulfilling missions much bigger than what Empower Home does. But Empower Home is the vehicle that helps with that, right? And so that's such a good point. A lot of this has to do with like what your dreams are, what's important to you as a person, and building that into your calculation. So if you want to every year give back $100,000 to charity, then you need to put that into your budget to where when you're doing the math for your financial freedom number, you're including that. Okay. So what's the calculation? How would they calculate their financial freedom number?
So it's really hard to do math on a podcast. So we'll make sure that these are in the show notes also. But you take your current budget or your future budget, I would say. Like, what do you want your life to be? You take that budget and you multiply it times 12 because there's 12 months in a year. So you're trying to get your annual budget is what you're trying to get. So that is how much money every year your investments need to be producing for you. That's like your passive income goal. Then you take that passive income goal and you multiply it times 25. We don't have enough time to get into all the principles of why it is like that. Just take my word for it. We can do a whole nother episode possibly on how you make this equation, but I just promise, take your passive income goal and multiply it times 25, and that becomes your financially free net worth goal.
I love it.
Yeah.
And then what you do is when you're calculating your net worth, so what George and I do is that we have that number, right? Our financial free number, right? And then we're calculating a minimum of every quarter, we're calculating our net worth. But then we also on the same sheet, we have a tab for calculating our passive income. And so we're calculating, okay, how close are we to that number for passive income? And the closer you get, the more freedom you feel to be able to make decisions that are the best for you and your family, not because you have to, but because you can. And that's where the big life really comes into play, is when you can do that.
Like right now, so Joshua and we have hit our financially free number. And because of that, we're getting to explore all of these other opportunities that I would never have been able to say yes to if we weren't there, or even explore. Like, we're talking about starting a community center in our neighborhood. Like, that's not a business model that really is self-sustaining, but because we have hit that financially free number, we may be able to give that back to our community. And I
love it.
That's so exciting. And so if you made it all the way to the end of this episode, but you wanted to run away when we said math, or you wanted to run away when you said budget, or when I tried to give you equations verbally, like, That's the why at the end. Is none of this is about numbers on paper. This is about the lives you get to have, the lives you get to impact. And that's why we do this. That's why we share this podcast with you, is because we do this hard stuff together so that you can make a big impact. To Sarah's point, you can be who you were created to be in the fullest way.
That's right. That's right. Well, guys, if you want to build wealth, the 3 things that you need to start tracking and watching, right? So what your spending is with the budget, your net worth, and your financial freedom number, and how close you're getting to that number each and every month, each and every quarter. And as you do that, as you develop the habit, and again, guys, none of us started with just knowing this, okay? Yeah. We all had to develop it and all had to build it, okay? And so follow our lead, because as you do that, you will not only be on the way to building that awesome empire, you will at the same time build that amazing life. And that's what we're about. And so get after it, start tracking, follow the path, and you will have clarity moving forward. And we cannot wait to see the lives that you guys build through impacting so many others, because you get to choose to do that. Bye, guys. Thanks for joining us today.
Have a great week.